Since Fortnite's earliest days, there's been a division amongst players so strong that it causes both sides to hate each other, all due to the input they play on. But why is that, and which input is better? The advantageous aim of controller, or the mechanical prowess that keyboard and mouse possesses? This is what we're here to find out. Now, if it were as simple as listing a couple pros and cons to each input in order to determine which input's better, that would be pretty boring and not nearly as thorough. Instead, I want to dive into every aspect and every interpretation of the question, which is better, starting with competitive. As you briefly saw earlier, it is no secret that controller once dominated the scene, with aim assist being extremely strong, all weapons dealing double headshot damage, and players consistently hitting shots like this. And this. But this was years ago. What about today's game? Well, it's no surprise that aim assist has been nerfed hard since then. So let's compare some of the strengths and weaknesses to each input. Keyboard and mouse is obviously much better for mechanics, as you have so many keys to bind each and every action to, as well as a mouse to control how you look around instead of just a joystick where you're only using your thumb. Real quick, I want to give a quick shout out to Dala for letting me use his gameplay. His YouTube will be linked down below. Now back to the video. Not only can you have better mechanics on keyboard, but you can have more consistent mechanics because of the increased control you have over the way you look around. Take Reet for example, an absolutely insane player with hundreds of thousands earned and one of the best fighters in the game right now, who is heavily credited with popularizing piece control. And not one time does he complete this drill without messing up. Sure, he isn't fully locked in, but it just goes to show that even at the top level, the level of control you have is still limited. This also means that when the weapons in the game are hit scan, meaning you don't have to lead your shots like the previous chapter, keyboard once again has an advantage, because the long range aim assist is practically non-existent, so it's much easier for a keyboard player to get the necessary surge tags that's required to compete in high level lobbies. Another big aspect of this game is off-spawn fighting, and unfortunately some of the time those fights are determined by whoever gets the weapon from 50-50ing a chest or a floor spawn. Now your drop is obviously a huge factor, but in a true 50-50, who are you putting your money on? The controller player who has to try and spam his singular pickup bind, or the keyboard player who has the ability to use scroll wheel pickup, or at the very least, double pickup binds? Once again, the advantage goes to keyboard. You may not think that these things are very significant, but every little advantage is super important and competitive. And that is evident by the fact that in the last LAN that was hosted where Peterbot and Poya won, 100 players competed, and only 5 of them were on controller. But wait, controller has its advantages too. The close range aim assist, while obviously significantly toned down, is still very noticeable and pretty decent at close range. There's a level of confidence that comes with knowing that you're pretty much always going to have really good close range spray aim, and that confidence helps to get refreshes and elims when you need them. Controller movement is also a massive plus, as the joystick allows for 360 movement, which even though keyboard has double movement, it isn't the same as 360. I've been playing a lot of keyboard recently, and honestly the movement is the hardest thing for me to get used to. However, as much as it does pain me to say this, at the current state of the game, controller simply falls way short. I mean, keyboard players can even get whatever this thing is, and still reap all the same benefits while now having 360 movement because of the joystick that's attached. So as far as competitive Fortnite goes, you gotta hand that to keyboard and mouse. I also can't not mention the fact that even though out of the 100 players at LAN only 5 were controller, that doesn't mean you can't reach the top on controller. If that were true, Mara wouldn't have won the 2023 LAN, and Reet wouldn't be as dominant as he is. And Teeny wouldn't have gotten back-to-back second places in FNCS on EU, as well as 6th at this year's Global Championship. So while keyboard has the clear advantage, you can most definitely still be amongst the best on controller. But what about creative? Not everyone is grinding to become the next Peterbot, so what input is better here? Well, all those little advantages that keyboard has that I listed earlier, such as off-spawn 50-50s and surge tags, go straight out the window. The game is dumbed down a lot, which honestly amplifies the movement advantage that controller has, because creative is strictly fighting, and your movement obviously plays a huge role in that. If we're talking strictly zone wars, there's a lot of good players on both inputs, and if you don't pay attention to zone wars, which I'm assuming most of you guys don't, then a lot of the names I could mention probably won't mean anything to you, so I'll just skip over that. But you do see a lot more controller players at the top compared to how many controller players are at the top in comp, because fighting isn't all mechanics. Your fighting IQ plays a big role in how good of a fighter you are, and whether or not you make smart edits and overall good plays. If we broaden our scope to creative as a whole, you are going to be at a disadvantage in box fights because 1, you don't have scroll wheel reset, and 2, box fights are generally more reliant on being able to do actions pretty quickly, like take a wall, edit it, and land a pump shot, which again, keyboard excels at. Now like I already mentioned, creative is pretty dumbed down down compared to the complexities of in-game, so there really isn't much to go on. However, I would once again give the edge to keyboard, but only slightly, and mostly because of box fighting. You are going to have some disadvantages on controller, but really at the end of the day, it's not going to be the difference between you becoming a good fighter or not, and you're at nowhere near as much of a disadvantage as you are in competitive. So we've talked about competitive and creative, but now I actually want to switch over to a completely different topic: value. If you aren't into all the crazy competitiveness of in-game and creative, and you simply want to casually play games on a budget, well then controller is the obvious answer. Because sure, you can get a super low-end keyboard and mouse for less than the $75 a brand new PS5 controller is going for nowadays, but any decent keyboard and mouse is going to cost you more than that. And if you want to get the high-end stuff, it's going to set you back even further, and not everyone wants to break the bank just to play some games. Another huge area where controller shines is on console. It is possible to play keyboard on console. However, you don't see too many people actually do that because it puts you at a huge disadvantage. The console input delay is too much for the quick movements you make with your mouse, making it extremely difficult to aim and pretty much do anything consistently. Now, if you just thought, well wait, that delay doesn't go away on controller, you would be correct. However, the slower movements of controller, due to the decreased sensitivity, is much better suited for console, on top of the fact that you have decently strong aim assist to counteract the delay that you play on. I played a PS5 tournament a while ago, and I can't believe I ever used to play on console because the delay was just so horrible. So shout out to you console players because it's truly not easy. I talked about value for casual players, but let's switch gears a bit and focus on the value for those who play a lot. I've been playing controller for years now, and I play much more than the average player, but honestly there's definitely a good amount of people who play more than me. And I still go through a PS5 controller roughly every 3 months, which is $300 every single year on just controllers, because they really don't last very long. Pause. I was curious as to see if it were like this for keyboard players, so I asked a bunch of my friends who also play a lot, and most of them had the same keyboard for forever, and they go through their mice like once every year to 2 years. So even though the equipment is more expensive, it is going to provide you with way more value because you're going to spend less money on that equipment over an extended period of time. But again, that's only if you play a lot. Okay, I want to do a quick recap because that was a lot of information. But first, I actually want to thank those of you who use my code. Your support doesn't go unnoticed, and I really do appreciate it, so thank you guys. Alright, recap. So I basically just killed my inner controller player and said that keyboard was better in just about everything, except for console. So is there even a point to playing controller? Well, I do want to mention that some of your guys' playstyles might just be better suited for controller, and that's okay. If you're like me, then controller holds a dear place in your heart, and you're always going to have a love for it. But in my opinion, I still strongly believe that keyboard is the superior input at this point in the game. But everyone is entitled to their own opinions, so let me know what you guys think. I'll be checking the comments. Also, to those of you who aren't new here, I will be uploading more, I promise, and if I don't, just please yell at me in my Twitter DMs or something. Okay, peace.